It's another Thursday, which brings us another Not Playing Politics with Alexander Keaton. And as always, my Rio Nick Bradshaw. How you doing, Nick?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on our own podcast.
On our own podcast, yeah.
Well, I realized as that was coming out, I was like, I don't think this is going to go the direction I'm thinking.
Well, it never does. You Dale Earnhardt righted us, is what you did.
Right? It's like saying thank you when someone says I love you.
Precisely. Unfortunately, we do have some very terrible news today. This is the final episode of Not Playing Politics on Thursday nights.
There we go. That caveat at the end. I was afraid I was out of work.
Yeah, no, exactly. This is this is the last night we're going to be on at 9 p.m. Central Standard Time on Thursday. We are, on the bright side, moving to Wednesdays starting next week. Wednesday at 7 Central Standard Time. That's 8 p.m. on the East Coast, and then I think that's 5 o'clock for those on the West Coast.
Yeah, I think we were just trying to reach out and to our fans and people, checking in with us. We really wanted to take the show in a direction that would access people being able to chime in and participate. We've really loved the participation, and for some of our friends and family and fans out there in places like Washington D.C. and Florida and Pennsylvania, it was just getting too late. I mean, we weren't even kicking off until 10 o'clock at night. So for many of them, they were like, we've got kids, we've got jobs, we want to be part of the show. How can we make this work? So we thought.
And I'm an old man who, even here in Texas, it's like it starts at 9 and we're getting done at 9:45, almost 10 o'clock, and I'm like, so late.
Yeah, so it's good. It's
good. Like I had dinner at Denny's like 12 hours ago. Like,
exactly.
what am I?
And I think that the shift to Wednesday is good. It's that hump day. It gets you over. You start the rest of the week off feeling maybe a little recharged. We felt that Wednesday was good, and the 7. We're going to try out the 7 hour to see how that works for us. And again, we can always flex. We're trying to test this to be just right. But this will be the last show on Thursday nights at 9, and we're going to be moving to Wednesdays, which I think is going to be a great shift for the show.
Yeah, it'd be a lot easier. And I would invite all two of our fans to join us on Parler, but that doesn't exist anymore.
We've got to stop endorsing things because, not that we've ever endorsed anything, but quick side note to any of our sports fans out there. My father used to be an avid football fan, and he's loyal to the Pittsburgh Steelers because he was born in Pittsburgh. But the truth is, over the last couple of years, with things going the direction they've gone, he hasn't really checked into sports much. But I bring this up to say the joke in our family used to be, in the 70s, the Steelers were the team of the decade. I mean, they were by far the most dominant sports team. And what happened that's so funny is my father used to say that they would be playing and they'd be winning and they'd be way up. And then my mother would walk into the room and just miraculously they'd start losing.
Yep.
So she wasn't allowed in the television room when the Steelers played. And I just thought that was so fantastic. So,
remember when television rooms were a thing?
Remember when schedules were a thing? Like,
tell me about it.
Thursday night, like I love that we're telling people when we're recording live, and we'd love for them to check in when we're live. But with the internet, that's not a thing anymore.
Right. Well, it's only a thing if you want to comment and yell at us for being the blowhards that we are. But yeah, I mean, just enjoying the beauty of the show and the dulcet tones of my voice. You can do that anytime. And you can do it in any room.
This episode has gone into a very weird direction, so I'm gonna step back and let that just kind of go downstream from us and shift us over to why we're talking about tonight's topic that we titled anti-social media. And the reason we wanted to have the play on words is, not just from the concept of pushing back, but obviously the concept of what has our antisocial behavior turned into, and how has the media either amplified or negated that. I think it's interesting to see that so full disclosure, this topic came from a paper that I was working on. I was putting together the idea of it while I was in graduate school, and then I started teaching. And to be honest, it just got too busy. But what I was going to make it about at the time was turning it more towards what had been utilized both as ISIS, ISIS's ascension, that of Al Qaeda. This ought to date how long ago I was in graduate school. But the point that I'm getting at is that I was jumping back and forth between that and between bullying, how people were using this antisocial behavior online for bullying. So the original topic of the paper was called digital jihad, when social media becomes antisocial. And the reason I wanted to do that, as I said, was that it was looking at the struggle. Jihad is, of course, a word that means to struggle, and I wanted to look at it from the perspective of how were these terrorist organizations utilizing these channels, not only because they were able to through things like Twitter or whatnot, but just the fact that you would think about people that were architecting these horrible plans, utilizing something like the internet to get this done. And again, from there, the second side of the topic was, well, wait a minute, what's another antisocial perspective? And it was bullying. And I thought, okay, well, there's a whole nother direction we can take this. It's just as much a struggle. It doesn't have to be a play on words with regard to, Middle Eastern terrorist groups, but I bounce the ideas back and forth. And as I said, I just got busy at the university. I got busy. I started teaching and working in that field. So the point that I'm getting at is, it's so ironic and so disturbing to see how cyclical these things are, because here we are in a whole new way. And Alex, I'll tell you, I could have added a third channel to this paper and turned it into when big tech organizations utilize they're not, I wouldn't even say covert. I would say they're overt position to willingly and from a perspective of editorializing, edit people, which now you're seeing come out. You're seeing Jack Dorsey, you're seeing people from Instagram. They're openly declaring this is not balanced. There is, a slippery slope. This is the Pandora's box. And it's funny because they're acknowledging it. That's the part that's been so unbelievable to me. I thought this would be an unrolling of a process that would be subtle and slow, kind of an incremental progressivism, and it isn't. It's been January 6th happened, and then ban, done, and now they're like, yep, we kind of lean one way, and they're open. It's in the news. I'm not even making this up. It's in print. It's in black and white.
So let me circle back to that point by going back to your original point of your paper. Way back in the Stone Age when you were, working on that paper,
right?
You were talking about how radicalization was occurring on the internet, and how the internet was being used to bully children with great efficiency. But here we are, we've moved forward, and now it is, instead of it being individuals doing it, it is the systems themselves that are bullying. It is the systems themselves that are actually creating and fomenting hate groups and these terrorist groups. And that's my whole point. That brings me back to what your point is, that you're surprised they're so open about it. The way they have allowed the social media platforms to breed the antisocial behavior, deliberately breeding it. Sorry, they've been deliberately breeding it. It's gotten to the point where that was all the excuse they need. Totalitarians almost never are incremental. They are always very overt. They're very in your face. The problem is most people don't ever bother to listen, right? It wasn't like Hitler was off talking about how he was going to be all rainbows and lollipops. He was very explicit about what was going to happen, but no one believed him. That's the problem. Whether it's Stalin, Mao Zedong, Fidel, it doesn't matter. They usually will tell you exactly what they want, and everyone's like, oh, they'll never do that. That's insane. No, the problem is we got to start believing these people. For decades, the leftists have told us who and what they are. They've told us that they're, when they're very public about saying, yeah, we may want to do some kind of re-education camp thing. This comes up all the time and has for years. Why are we surprised that when they finally get the right level of power, that they just go whole hog? And let's not that I can transition from hog, but this is a great example, right? Since the whole Parler thing, with Parler being wiped out, I've seen plenty of people bring up, well, I thought that, if a baker doesn't have to bake a cake for a gay couple, then Twitter or Facebook or doesn't have to have conservatives, and Amazon doesn't have to provide server space to Parler. Well, the problem is, and feel free to use this in your arguments with people. The problem with that metaphor is, the baker was willing to serve the couple. He just wasn't willing to actually what he felt was actually engaging in speech, was to write the was to actually make it a wedding cake officially by placing letters on it. No one has asked Amazon to be like, yep, Parler's the thing to go to, everyone. No one's asked Facebook to publicly endorse conservatives. That's not the problem. This is where things become apples and oranges. Now, you can argue over whether or not the baker was actually engaging in speech, or was simply allowing their speech, or did not. It's like, you can have that argument, but it's certainly not what was happening on the internet. Secondly, that baker didn't collude with every other bakery in town and say, don't serve this gay couple. Moreover, he didn't call every construction company and collude with them, saying, don't build a bakery that might make a cake for the gay couple. And to make it even further, that bakery did not enjoy legal privileges that protected it from lawsuits on the grounds that it would bake cakes for gay weddings and allow their messages to be put out on cakes. That's the difference. With whether it is Amazon, whether it's Facebook, whether it's Twitter, all these things, they are actually colluding with one another to ban speech that is legal. They enjoy very special protections under the 230 that they are given those privileges because they're supposed to be the commons. That was the thing. They're supposed to enjoy those protections. The fact that they are removing, and by the way, this is not the first time they've done it. They've actually done this in the past. I have a friend he is a Hispanic conservative. He used to have a Facebook page. They really weren't doing anything controversial, but they got blasted. Remember when Facebook did that big cleansing, like 6 or 7 years ago? They did this big wipe of everybody that was conservative, and he was like, "But why was my Facebook account wiped?" They said, "Well, we thought you were a Russian bot. Our bad." That was their response, and they got away with it. This is hugely problematic, not just because of what they're doing, right? It's ultimately because they have the amount of power just 3 companies have, right? Google, Amazon, and it's, I guess you could argue Facebook is separate as well, but those, in one way or another, those 3 basically control information. And the problem is, when they colluded with each other, and they've colluded with banking systems. It's like we're starting to see this thing where everyone's like, yep, you can't do business with us now. This is collusion to assault an entire ideology. It is beyond any words that I have. It's like they just got to that point. And so here's the question: is it the left? Is it that big tech is afraid of the leftists? Is it big tech are leftists? Is it the banks are afraid of big tech? Or is big tech afraid of the government? Is the government afraid of big tech? Or is it all one big incestuous group that has solidified power in such a concrete way, we may have no way of breaking free of it?
So a couple things. I want to see what happens. I'm gonna take this back a couple steps because I think it's interesting to consider. First and foremost, I think what we're entering now is a phase of how we as people in this country, and I don't want to so easily partition us off as left and right, but ideologically that chasm is growing wider and wider. So what I'm getting at is I think the ideologies that are driving some of those are fundamentally different in their structure, in their process of how you learn. And I'll give you an example. Um, Recently, a story was coming out talking about how Jerome Powell, the Fed chief, was saying and making some comments that basically showed that the administration had taken a strong policy on monetary policy, and it was paying off, and it was being effective, and it was strong, and it was impactful, and that's great. And you step back and you think to yourself, okay, well, the U.S. is taking a monetary policy, and it's something strong, and it's good. And then you would say, okay, well, that's because the right or Republicans or conservatives or whatever have policies with regard to low taxes, and they want to have money in the hands of the people, therefore that they can generate that by decreasing taxes. You increase the amount of available money to circulate in that economy, and so you look at it from a position of measurable metrics and kind of hard science. I know economics can get kind of wonky out there, but that's the basis of what I'm trying to say. It can be studied, it can be measured, and it has a series of matrices that you can and metrics that you can measure, I should say. I think when I hear things from the left, the reason I struggle is not just because they're that I may personally disagree with certain elements of what they're saying. It's fundamentally because I don't understand what a lot of the topics that are being raised are. And the best example I can give you is this. Recently, a story came out where they talked about the concept that the fair representative out of New York's 29th, I believe, is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. And she, I think, is it the 5th? I don't want to get the number, but out of the district she's coming out of, where she was making a comment that the GOP was evidently wrapped more with preserving here's a direct quote, preserving, quote, the mythology of whiteness. Now, here's the problem that I have. I don't know what that means. I mean, I don't mean that flippantly. I don't mean that to sound like, ha, let's crush the Dems and crush the libs. That's not what I'm doing. I'm saying I have a more clear understanding, though I'm not an economist, of understanding what it means to position monetary policy and the impacts of what that means, rather than something that sounds like you would do in a freshman year composition course at a very liberal college. And so I don't understand the argument because I think, as I was trying to previously state, there is a chasm that is now dividing farther and farther and farther apart and we're developing our own languages, our own ideologies, our own ways of communicating. Now, why do I bring up that point? Because I believe the next tier of this is going to be the manner with which we establish, like a military operation, with which we establish communications, which is the first step, right? So it's a crucial step, I'll say. So now you're starting to see, will Parler come back? I hope so. I hope so. It may have to be the sacrificial lamb in all this, but what are you starting to see now? People's literacy with regard to privacy rights on apps are becoming so literate, and people are becoming so aware that they're jumping ship everywhere. Signal is a texting and communication app that you can get that many people have been talking about for a long time because it's got end-to-end encryption. It's got high levels of security. People are leaving things. Forget Facebook. Facebook is a giant commercial. YouTube is a giant commercial. YouTube either shows you products that you're looking for through television programming, or it shows you commercials about that television programming. And now they have shows embedded with the commercials because they know that people skip commercials. So what I'm getting at is that those are commercial products. Facebook, Google, Instagram, YouTube, those are commercials. That's all that they produce, and people are aware of that. But like WhatsApp, these are communication channels, but people are leaving those channels and going to things like Signal. I recommend to our fans out there, check out Signal. Ironically, I've had a friend, a mutual friend of ours, who himself, I would say, I would identify with him. I would look at him much more on the left, but he was a big fan of this years ago. Signal, Signal, Signal. Everybody's got to be on Signal. And so that's the way that I think we're going. So you take this ideology that starts to split within a society, and then you take the manner with which they communicate those ideologies, that starts to split. And now you start to form communication channels with which they are designed to serve. So people will start to do that. So what I'm getting at is I think you're going to start to see the rise of conservative media. And I don't know that it's going to rival your major Hollywood studios and rival all these big things immediately, but I think just as capitalism will do, it will create channels for people to go to. The Pandora's box has been opened, and you're not going to get that back in the box. You're not going to get that round back into the magazine. It's out. It's been done. And the way that we now have to do is to discuss and discover. And by the way, I'm heartbroken that this is potentially going to happen, because I feel like it's just going to have two massive echo chambers. Now it gets us away from that antisocial perspective, that bullying perspective, that cancel culture perspective, but it gets us to that other side now where you're just talking into you're just speaking to an echo chamber. And I think that becomes slightly dangerous, because I think the arcing thing that we're facing right now is where it comes to this differentiation, and we can use the riots, is that it's not about just Donald Trump. It's not about just the people that stormed the castle. It's now about the people. Yeah, yes, I said that phrase. It's now about the people that have anything to do with, are you a Republican? Are you a conservative? Are you on the right? Do you support these policies? Do you know about these policies? Well, therefore, you're bad. It doesn't matter who. It doesn't matter. You're having people that are being kicked off of platforms for liking posts. So you're posting, and you're kicking off people. Once you kicked off the president of the United States, you said in one statement, nobody has any authority. Nobody.
Right.
This will come back because the pendulum will swing. But that's where it is. And it's unfortunate. It really is. And what also happens is, to people like me, I just get off everything. I'm just done. I don't want it. I don't even want it to get on me. I feel dirty with all of it. I made a joke with some of my friends. I'm so grateful I sold my Google stock a while back, because I felt dirty owning it. I'm like, ugh, I don't care what the upside of it is. I need to get out of this.
Well,
okay. I'm not saying that magnanimously, but I'm saying there are people out there that are much more committed, much more devout, much more fundamentally supportive of ideological belief structures. I'm just saying that for me, I just stepped back and said, no, thanks. I just don't need this, and I no longer choose to engage in any of them. And so you walk away from all the platforms.
So here's the thing, right? Because I mean, at this point, we haven't really said anything that hasn't been said 100 times by 100 different people. But I do want to. You mentioned the storming the castle. I want to take this opportunity to go back to that for just a split second and point out, because I think this is a huge point here, and it's going to take us the rest of the episode to explore. And I think this ties into our conversation. When it's your city being burned down, when it's your business being destroyed, when it's your neighbors getting shot and stabbed and beaten to death in these riots, nobody cares. When it's the Capitol building being quote unquote stormed, yes. Again, no one on this channel is approving what happened. Violence is never the answer. We've said this 1,000 times. I would also like to point out that this is exactly why I said I don't believe in protesting, because I don't think it's effective. I think this kind of stuff happens because of the protests. But my point here is, now it's a world-ending calamity.
Alex, I think we've lost contact. We cannot hear you. All right, ladies and gentlemen, the joys of running a live broadcast. We will get this technical problem solved. Thank you for your patience and for standing by. We will get on top of this right now. I'm going to take a moment here while we get Alex back up and running. Hopefully everything will be back online here shortly. But I do want to reach out to our comment section here. I see Mr. D Knuckle joining us once again. Welcome. We're glad you're here. I want to take a look down here and see. I appreciate your comment regarding the joke about my mother. Yes, my father was loved my mother very dearly, but I think he loved the Steelers almost as much. And yeah, to your point about Parler having a contract with Amazon, and the Baker not. Yeah, I mean, I think we're all looking for this high water mark to apply, and we're looking for some standard somewhere. And I just don't think that that's necessarily the case that we're going to face anymore. I think the situation where we sit is going to be now. There's going to be a push, I think, from the new administration to create big government, big policy, big presence, so that you can have these massive arcing themes rather than the intricate, nuanced specificity that's required for such things. But I think we're going to see it differently over the next 4 years, and we'll see. We'll see how that transpires. I don't know necessarily what that's going to look like, but I do think that the stories coming out about Parler over the last 24 hours seem to reflect that they're either going to try to come back stronger, but at the same time, they're not sure if they're going to come back at all. I know there is a suit now pressing for that, but we'll see how that goes, because evidently, according to the CEO of the company, Amazon Web Services, as AWS, just dropped them entirely.
They weren't given a warning, and it's not. So yeah, I'm back. By the way,
okay, good.
Yeah, no, I was assaulted by big tech's censor ninjas.
Yeah, exactly.
I had to fight them off for a second, but I'm good.
You did it in 2.5 minutes, my friend. Congratulations.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you got to have the silver crosses, which I've already got, right? But yeah, no. Long story short, everyone who's bending over backwards to complain or to show how terrible the storming of the Capitol doesn't give a damn about you, because they didn't do this when it was your town, your federal buildings, your businesses, and your children getting killed. And this is my problem with all of it. It's about centralization of power. And this is where I think we're talking about the creation of two different echo chambers. The left echo chamber, which is your Twitters, your Facebooks, and you're only allowed if you stay within a particular ideological norm. But then we have the conservatives; they create their own thing, and of course they'll be more pro free speech. But here's my problem: that we may not get a chance to build that if all of the banking systems, if all of these other institutions are now free to actively oppose conservatives. They don't have to give you your money. They don't have to filter your cash. If PayPal's like, nope, you know what? We're not going to move money from this account to this account because they're conservative. Then, or even conservative adjacent. That was the other claim for Facebook, right? They said it was QAnon and QAnon adjacent accounts. Like, what the heck does that even mean? That's the point. They're taking the opportunity. My question is, will we even be given the opportunity to create our own versions of these things? Because it sure as the world doesn't look like they're going to let that happen. Do we have? So, I mean, at this point, we are looking at an actual, like, I don't want to use the word civil war per se, but if you have entire banking systems that will not work with you, and you have to create your own banking systems, if you're not allowed speech over here, you're only allowed speech over here. This is the creation of, I mean, this is drawing lines. This is the line in the sand. It's, you are not allowed within this society over here. I mean, how is this not the creation and divorce, or the creation of two different nations?
Well, I think we need to look at the symbolism that's also going on, right? I mean, the fact that it's the president, and they can say that it was reasons of his speech and this and that. I mean, again, That's not what we're going to use this show for tonight, but it's symbol, right? When you block the president, that's what you're saying. There's no one else. That's the leader of the free world. There's no. That's it. What are they going to say? Well, we're going to block the president, but we're not going to block Kevin in Connecticut because Kevin's a great guy. There's no one that can't. They can't be just outright blocked. Okay, fine. They're going to say, I'm a business. I'm going to do what I want. That's fine. On the other side, the riots that were going on in the country for months, burning things, causing damage, death, destruction, mayhem, attacking businesses, attacking people, their homes, all of that. That was all set out with that intent. I don't necessarily know how many people were there with the intent of storming the Capitol. I honestly don't know. I don't know if it was part of it. I do know that the event that was scheduled to be there was a scheduled event. So I don't know that just spontaneously happened. I know they were supposed to walk to the Capitol and have this protest. But what I'm getting at is when they stormed it, that was symbolic. They weren't attacking a gas station in Pittsburgh. They weren't burning a Foot Locker to the ground in Los Angeles. They were entering the people's house. That's a symbol. We've spoken before about, when I had a talk with a buddy of mine who's a military aviator, and he's a history guy. And I said, it's striking when you think about it, that just like, the Doolittle raid, when we got hit at Pearl, it was a massive impact. I mean, a lot of the Pacific Fleet was just annihilated.
Yeah, just destroyed.
But when they went and had their raid on Tokyo, it didn't level Tokyo. Sure, it caused some damage with bombs and people up. I mean, it's war. But they demonstrated that they could hit right at the heart of Japan. And it had that effect. It entered their psyche. And that's why I think that when I look at what's been going on, there's a lot of stuff that I think we have to consider here. The wars that I see coming are wars of ideas, wars of propaganda, the oldest wars of all time. It's the same old wars, just done in new ways. They're going to look for a branding of Democrats, a branding of Republicans. This is why but you're already seeing it. And you're seeing the purists on the left and right both stand up for what it is that they feel is there, and that's what's there. Okay. I mean, I think that the lesson that I've been exposed to recently watching a lot of this is that none of this is new. It's all been done before. Maybe not to the scale, maybe not with the language, maybe not even here, but it's all been done before. And it comes with learning new styles, tactics, and ways of combating it, of addressing it, of adapting to it, and of overcoming it. And I believe that we can. I will be very transparent on this show. I will be very open with our fans and our family and friends out there that know me personally. I have tried, especially through COVID, to work to understanding and newly expressing elements of the faith that I was raised in and part to be. And I cherish that. And it is through those lenses that I'm starting to look at so many of these other things now from a completely different perspective. And that's why I say, I'm not trying to say it with frivolity. I'm not trying to say it loosely, but we will survive. We will make it. The part that I want to skip through is all the posturing. It's all the language. It's all the glorifying an ideology of whiteness. I don't even know how to translate that. I want to sit down and say, you think it's bad that this happened. I think this is bad that something happened. Let's work out a resolution. Not, well, you've got 51. I guess I'm just going to be miserable for years. I mean, that doesn't do anything. So that's why I want to see what happens and get people in there that can work. They work. I know I say it every show, Alex, but they work for us.
Not anymore. Not for a long time.
No. And they need to be reminded of that.
Hold on. I forget where it was. Hold on. I forget where it was. I'll find it for the next show. But there was a group that came out and they said straight up, the United States is no longer a constitutional republic. It isn't like, again, Kevin in Sheboygan. This was like a major international group that was listing the different kinds of governments. They listed the United States as a plutocracy. And one of the things they point out was none of our laws that actually pass has anything to do with the people. It's all lobbyists. They have not worked for us for a very long time. And moreover, your desire to have people who go in and actually have a conversation about these things, that's the problem. The left that we are seeing right now, and this isn't Republican Democrat, because I'm throwing a lot of Republicans into this. There's a new chasm that's being formed, and it's not liberal versus conservative the way we think of it on a spectrum. It is literally totalitarians, a religious totalitarian, which is the left, versus those who believe in liberty and freedom on the right. This is something brand new. The problem is the people on the left, you can't have a conversation because the entire conversation is predicated on a lie. And they know it. They know that you want to have the conversation. That's the problem. We're trying to have a conversation. They're using the conversation to buy time.
Well, I think when you say
you can't have a conversation with someone if they're lying about the premise or about the reason they're having the conversation with you.
Right, but I think when you say, well, one side wants liberty and freedom and the other wants totalitarian, regime, I want to be careful how we word that. Not from a PC perspective, but from a perspective of the reason that it looks as though they want that totalitarian regime is because they believe what they're pushing is right. They believe what they're pushing is, from their perspective, free and fair and open. When you've got someone like AOC, I mean, I literally she singularly alone, I feel like, is the greatest fundraiser for most people running in a lot of areas. When you listen to what she says, recently she's put out 2 comments. I'm going to paraphrase so that I don't misquote. But the gist of one was, we basically need to have a ministry of policing of the free press. Wow. And the press is on her side. But a ministry of the free press to go after that. So that caught wind. And then another one was that the South needs to be liberated because it's been under the jackboot of the Republicans. So it says, again, how she views how people in the South have it. It says the perspective. If they could only be freed, then they would do the right thing. So again, I say, when it looks like they have this totalitarian regime, sure. I mean, if you want to say the way that they want to articulate their programs is through that kind of control, I can understand that perspective. What I'm saying is that the reason they say that is because they believe what they're saying is right or keeps them in power. If they undermine them, they would be gone. And they would. That's what I'm saying. That's why when people say for the longest time, and this is not me saying this about the president-elect to score points now and say, ha, 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 I put in a dig. I think it's been known for a while about Biden that for the kind of politician he is a elitist, company man, yes man. For decades, people know this about this guy. And the joke has been, what is Biden's perspective on this? And the answer is always, he'll get back to you after polling comes in. Like, I cannot name people that voted for Biden because they wanted Biden.
Oh, of course not.
And I don't think that to be flippy either. Like, a little bit. But the point that I'm getting at is that when you say about this plutocracy and having it, okay, then we need to be reminded. I'll give you a quick side example. When you undermine the confidence of the people in their own government and you start fraying the fabric between what people's intentions are and viewing it, you're just going to further splice things. When you put Eric Honeypot Swalwell on a committee for an impeachment of the president due to foreign interest, how seriously do you think people are going to be mindful of that or care about what his opinion is? You and I both know if he were a Republican, they would literally stop printing money until someone had him resign.
But that's the point, because none of this is actually about. That's my whole point. Whatever they're telling you it is about, it's not about that, because that's the fig leaf. The problem is this is where I know what you're saying. It's like they believe they're doing right. I know they believe they're doing right, but they're totalitarians, and that's not even a question, because a totalitarian says, I know what's best for you and you're going to do it or I shoot you. Well, that's where we're at. That's what they're doing. They are totalitarians by any stretch of by any definition.
Well, fortunately,
by any definition,
anyone is pulling triggers, but I understand.
No, Nick, stop right there. No, you can stop right there. They have been. Let's forget the street violence. Right? I'm not talking about the friends of mine that I've had who have been hospitalized. I'm not talking about the guy who got shot. I'm not talking about David Dorn. I'm talking about if the police can show up to your house, they've got guns. That's the problem. And shooting doesn't necessarily require a literal gun. If they can remove your ability to make money, if they can remove your ability to freely move about the country, if they can remove your ability to even be hired, that they might as well be pulling a gun on you. That is force by any definition.
I recognize force. I'm simply saying that, thankfully, outside of anecdotal evidence at this point, there's no scaled level of violence regarding firearms or anything. Because let's be honest, even if it were to go that way, it would be spun in a way that, again, the answer would be, first and foremost, we don't want to have people being hurt at anything. Okay, point one. Point two, independent of that point, I think we know Rahm Emanuel, never let a tragedy go to waste. You're looking at never let a crisis go to waste. You're looking at a situation that if people were to show up, and God forbid, even in their own self-defense, they were to be antagonized or someone threw something at them or they get shot, it's going to be guns are the problem. It's going to be guns are the problem, and therefore let's go for the guns. We've talked about this before. I want to step back in this for just a second. We've talked about this before, that it talks about the differences of how we look at problem solving, the ideology that drives where we are. And I'll give you an example. I've noticed many times that people and friends that are Democrats or on the left or whatever, they're very driven tactically. They're very driven by the tool. If I get rid of the gun, there's no more crime. The problem is that's not functionally accurate at all, because the number of gun deaths has gone down. The number of all these other ways of doing it, they've gone down. That's what it is. Chicago's got the tightest gun restrictions in the entire nation, and it's got some of the highest gun crime rates in the country. So the correlation between gun regulation and crime is not only adverse or inverse. It's inaccurate. It's a fallacious metric. It means nothing. But the way they're going to control the narrative is to say guns are bad. People who want guns are dangerous. If we take guns away, people will be more safe. Now, that could speak to your totalitarian point. Put the hands in the guns there. So that's why I say, and this is the part that is, quite honestly, to me, it's the most concerning. Follow me down this path. Yes, I'm very concerned about what's going to come about in this administration. Absolutely. I'm very open about that. Sure. First off, because we had a guy who campaigned that literally never left a basement, didn't answer questions, and still doesn't. You don't know. You don't know what his policies are. He was never forced to answer them by an unbiased and open media that was seeking the truth. So
that doesn't exist anymore.
So the answer is, I don't know what's going to happen over the next 4 years, but yes, I am. I am fundamentally concerned. But let's think to the second and third level effects, and let's take it to here. The pendulum will always swing back. Always. You got Trump because of Obama. So whatever's going to take place now, whatever's going to be pushed this way, all I'm going to say is this. I wonder what it's going to look like when the pendulum comes back. I wonder what it's going to look like when people stop just accepting. We're creating a social currency. We're creating a level of, if I don't identify with your politics, I'm not going to serve you at a restaurant, let you on a plane, let you buy clothes, bank with you, lend to you, loan to you, do it. What are you going to, you're going to shut down economies based on that? That's a great way to bifurcate a country right on the spot. So all I'm going to say is this. Yes, I don't know what's going to be happening in the next 2 to 4 years. I don't think Biden does either. I don't think he has any clue whatsoever. But I'm concerned about what that pendulum looks like when it swings back.
Well, that's my problem. I'm worried about here's the problem. I feel like the pendulum has gone so far in like literally 0.0 seconds.
Uh-huh.
Either there's no room for snapback, or there's nothing left but.
Right. And yes, okay, so that's my point. Yes. I don't know when that will happen, but it will. Again, I want to state, and I'm not even going to get into the topic of whether or not good, bad, and different. Everyone's going to go through their own ways. They've dug into where they think about it, and I'm not going to use the show right now for that kind of platform. What I'm going to say is this. There's a difference between setting a Foot Locker on fire and storming the Capitol of the United States. And they're not just buildings. And I understand that. In speaking with people, I have been amazed at the feedback that I've gotten, because they are just as passionate. Yes, across the board, most people say, I thought it was terrible. I think it's unfortunate these people lost their lives. I think it's dangerous. I wish that it never happened. And then there's others that say, what took them so long? This is what we need to do to finally see what's going on. This is what we need to push for. This is people finally standing up and saying, we will not be oppressed. All I'm saying is, with all these things that are cracking down on people, to your previous point, you're right. You stop letting people make a living for themselves, they're going to get desperate. You start backing them into a corner, they're going to fight their way out. They stormed the Capitol with where they are already now. Where's it going to go as that jackhammer comes down on them? That's why I was saying, if I hold a concern in my heart for my countrymen and for the welfare of everybody here in our country that wants a better life, that's the concern I have.
Well, and so this goes back to, because again, we share the same fear. It's like the problem is those on the left they've pushed this, and they've been pushing this for 30, 40 years. They just finally got the right connect. They felt like they just got everything they got just the right amount of power that they think they can do anything that they want, and they're springing this trap right now, and they think that they can get everyone to yield and comply. My fear is there isn't time to fix this. It's going to get uglier, because I can't even say that it's going to turn violent. It's already violent. Violence has been visited upon. Forget the social. Actual physical violence has been met out on conservatives for 4 years, really consistently. And here's the problem. It's easy to say, well, it's all anecdotal. Well, everything is anecdotal. The problem is, at what point do we, does the vast number stop being anecdotal and become a pattern? So my problem is, it's already violent. And this is just one more push towards absolute use of force to control a population. My fear is there isn't time. But let's assume for a moment that there is time to solve this problem. How do we solve it? Do we solve it by creating conservative-only banks? Is that what we have to do? Do we have to create a banking system entirely separate from everyone else? Do we have to create an entirely separate internet system? Like, this is...
Well, I think we have to go back to the fundamental understanding. This is what I was saying before about one person looks at the tool, the other person looks at the trade, right? Again, if we get rid of guns, there's no crime. No, you get rid of crime, or you reduce crime by increasing opportunity for people to better themselves. Hey, it's not good for me to go and sell drugs or rob or shoot people because I can end up in prison, number one, which when you're shutting down prisons, there's no consequence. So then you got another channel that's almost incentivizing crime. But you increase opportunity. You increase capability for people to do better things. Again, lower taxes, increase job markets, do what you need to do. But I think what I'm getting at is for the short run, what do? We have to go back to understanding the prospect. I'll give you an example because I wanted to clearly show this. Both Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi have complimented themselves on how capable they have demonstrated such diversity in their administration. Nancy Pelosi picking together a impeachment team, management team, these managers that represent all facets of the LGBTQ community, of gender identity, of sex, all these things. That's great. Of course, the problem is, if they're all leftist Democrats, then they all share the identical ideology. So there's no diversity of thought there at all. None, zero. But they look differently. And I want to drill down on this right now. And I want to specifically ask the question, what do you think Martin Luther King would say? Because they have fundamentally rejected, by definition, they have rejected it. They have rejected it by saying, it is not the content of your character. It is absolutely the color of your skin or your sexual identity. It's certainly not your religious identity unless it's non-Christian and non-Jewish. Then it can become anything we want it to be.
Right. Well, and you got to be non-observant. It's not just, you can be a Catholic, you can be Jewish, you just got to be non-observant.
Right. But that's what I'm saying. Like, we're looking, think about what it is. Again, the tactical approach. Well, I have 9 people, but they all belong to the same party. They're all in a certain bent in that party, and they're all very identifiably loyal to this philosophy. So there's no diversity at all. But it's like, this one's 5'4", this one's 5'9", this one's got blue eyes, this one's got brown eyes. It's meaningless. And so therefore, the trade, the ideology, the history, the capacity to understand and grow, the thought that goes into recognizing what it means to have a conduct of character about you is erased. And what matters is your skin color. I had a friend of mine write to me earlier today, a buddy of mine, he's a Mexican guy, super sharp guy, love him to death, super, super bright guy, former helicopter pilot in the Navy, Naval Academy graduate, super, super smart guy, very successful in banking, now living out on the West Coast. And he made a joke to me about it. And he said, Dave, it's a shame. You're just going to have to just live life, the rest of your life hiding from everyone. And he, as to prove a point, he went down the list. He's like, you heterosexual, middle-class, Christian white male. And so all I could respond with was,
cisgendered white male.
All right, so I wrote back and I was like, boy, my parents really set me up for failure. Thanks a lot, genetics. And I think how silly it is, because those are silly things you say with your friends and you text each other goofy memes. But is it? That's what I'm saying, that we have the change that we're going through right now, Alex, I think is absolutely, it's so forced. It is so forced. It's not natural. It's why so many people don't understand it. I don't know what it means to preserve the ideology of whiteness. I don't know what that phrase means.
It means you want an argument against the liberals. What it means.
The ideology. How do you engage it? How do I make myself aware of that?
Hold on. You're not supposed to engage it. You're supposed to be subdued by it.
Right.
So hold on. But hold on. So this is. Okay. Obviously, I agree with everything you just said. It is the modern leftist identitarianism is nothing but racism. Everyone's like, oh, it's identitarian. No, it's racism. It's the same crap. That you can go. It's the same racist crap that tell me you can't even tell me there's a difference between the Ku Klux Klan and the modern leftists. The simple fact of the matter is they believe fundamentally that your race determines everything. So, but let's go back to the question I have. I agree with you. We got to be able to get beyond it. We got to be able to do these things. How? Because I don't think there is time to get past this, particularly when the other side doesn't want to. The other side sees it as power. You said, how do we even understand this? You're not supposed to understand it. You're supposed to obey. That's the problem. That's why they created it. You're not supposed to understand it.
Yeah, you're right. That's not sustainable, though.
Well, but
collapse on itself.
Okay, here's the problem. Things do collapse on themselves after 200 or 300 years. Russia took 70 years to collapse. It collapsing in on itself oftentimes means deaths by the thousands, if not sometimes millions, when it comes to their political ideology of totalitarianism.
Right. And I pray, of course, that we never, I for the welfare of all of our people and the safety and security of the United States. But I think it's important that we realize our only solution cannot be more hyperbolic language. And I don't mean you and me on this show in particular. I mean in general. This concept of, what we had to hear for 4 years was that Donald Trump was a constitutional crisis and that anybody who followed him was Joseph Goebbels. I mean, that's just dangerous. And I think you're going to see some of that language go away from the left because now they've got their guy and their puppet to do what they want. And they've got this ability to move forward with.
I think it's going to ratchet up. Because they have their meat puppet.
Well, I think it's going to ratchet up, that it's going to be turned towards. So that's the ideology that's coming out, or the thought that's coming out now is that, and you're seeing it in some of the conservative news channels, saying along the lines of, look, Trump being impeached has nothing to do with it. It has to do with impeaching his movement, impeaching the Trumpist perspective in the Republican Party, and weeding it out. McConnell taking these seats to walk these lines. Murkowski, your quintessential big house politicians, right? The people that constantly do this little dance of the line where they endorse the vote for impeachment, but they don't vote for it themselves. So they say that it should happen, but they're not going to vote for it. And I mean, I think that look, you're already seeing people talk about the Constitutionalist Party, all these other things that are coming about. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's, as our previous shows, maybe it's the Phoenix. Maybe it needs to burn to the ground. Maybe they need to.
I'm all for. No, at this point, what we need to do is burn it down. Metaphorically speaking, people. I don't vote Democrat, so you can't take that literally. This is metaphor. But here's my question. how do we create this new party if we can't buy food?
Well,
How do we create this new party if we can't even communicate with one another? How do we create this new party if we can't actually have a super PAC? Because all of the companies that actually have these things are preventing anyone from expressing any ideology or any thought or asking questions that's not approved by the state. When the state is now officially Democrat.
which state did you
No,
say?
the state.
Oh,
Writ large.
the state. Got it.
The state. Yeah,
I think you build it.
but how? You can't build things without tools.
Right.
If
Look, if you build it, they will come. Donald Trump. I think you know what I think the solution is: populism.
Yes, no, I agree. Look, I'm right there with it. In fact, we need to do an entire episode on populism. But I go back to this fundamental question. Maybe this is a question we end on, so we can so that our lovely viewers and listeners, as they, by the way, share, like, ding, do all the things, inflict this upon everyone. This needs to grow so we can have a broader conversation. And maybe
it's your fault.
Yeah, exactly. But also, this is the question I think we need to end on, and everyone can figure this out and then tell us what you think. How do we build something if the entire currently existing banking system, if all of the systems that we can't build something if we don't have the money, if we can't even access our own money to do it, we can't create and we can't raise funds if we can't send the money from one place to another. 90% of all money is digital. There's no passing the hat anymore. If PayPal is just going to be like, we're not going to give you your money because we found out that you don't speak the good truth. That's the problem. Like, how do we build this thing? How do we do this other thing? If big tech, the banking system, and the Democrat-led government have all now become one big incestuous triad, and now just say, look, unless you toe our line, you don't exist. How can we even build this infrastructure if we can't access our money, if we can't communicate with one another? And I mean, they're literally talking about pulling Newsmax, Fox News, One American Nation off. Even radio spots, even conservative radio hosts are being told what they can't say anymore. How do we do this if we can't communicate, we can't access our money, and the government's just going to say, nope, you don't toe the right line, you don't exist anymore?
I think we do it by the way we are. This is going to sound like a conundrum. It's going to sound antithetical, but we do what we've always done. You go back to the basics, we get creative, and we start something anew. I mean, this is the way that I really do, truly, honest to goodness, it's how I see it. It's how you take someone like, not everybody has been in lockstep with a lot of this. And I'm not just trying to use big names out there. And who knows where they stand on other things. And I'm not building this one person up, but I'll use Elon Musk. He was one who has posed a different perspective to say, he's moved. He left California. He sold his properties. He's got, warehouses and factories and stuff opening in Texas. He's put his money where his mouth is. Literally, he's put his company, one of his 14 companies, where it is. He's the world's richest man. And he said, you're not going to be happy with the arbiters in Silicon Valley as your guardians of free speech. I mean, he said as much. We can set up. I don't care how many people there are pushing some line. Every time in history, it's been the underdog that ever made a difference in history. It's been the underdog when the underdog overtook, that's when that historical perspective took place.
So you're saying, so what I'm hearing is photocopiers and zines.
I'm saying that in the age that we live in, let me tell you something. A handwritten note is vastly more secure than a text. I'm saying that maybe it doesn't move as fast. Maybe we create our own channels. Maybe we do whatever. But you're already seeing it. We started off the show by saying, look, people are going to Signal. They're getting exponential growth. Why? Because they realize what's important, what's going on there. The currency of the future is not going to be currency. It's going to be privacy. And I think that where we're looking at now is putting ourselves into a posture to answer your question and let our fans go. It's this perspective. We do what we've always done. We think something out. We don't respond with an emotional reaction. Good policy is hardly ever made when we're hot-headed about things. We think, but most importantly, we do. We do something. we do anything. And some of that stands with when you stand up and say, this will not continue.
And to that, we bid all of our listeners and the new listeners who are going to come, like I said, inflict this upon your friends and let the infection grow, because it's needed now more than ever. In the chat below, tell us what do you think. Tell us, how do we fix this? What does this new thing build and look like? And maybe next week we talk on our new time, Wednesday at 7 p.m. Central Standard. We can discuss what populism is. Let's actually flesh this out. Why is populism maybe the way forward? Can that be the political solution that actually makes this country better? And how do we build this thing? Let's start talking these things out. This is not about this show is not about complaining about what's happening. It's about how do we move forward and build something new and build something better. How do we save this country from the ideology that has just taken over through subversion and through totalitarian force? Guys, we believe in you. We believe that this country can be saved, but we got to do it the right way. So we'll see y'all at 7. We look forward to hearing your responses. And Nick, any other thoughts?
Just above all things, the way that we make this country what we want is by remembering what's most important. That is to stay positive, to love yourself and someone else, and remember that we never got anywhere staring into the darkness, but rather focusing on the light.
Sounds like a plan to me. We'll see y'all later.